kill the flame.
Halloween, the Old Myers Place, Chapter 10. Mary hung up the phone and stared blankly at her bedroom wall. She couldn't believe the news she'd just heard. Shannon had just informed her that Tanya and Rob never came home last night. No one had seen them since the mall last night. Tanya's parents were calling around frantically trying to locate their daughter. Shannon had convinced a sort of a true story, saying that they'd all gone to the mall last night and just fooled around in the parking lot. She told Tanya's parents that the couple had wandered away and no one could find them. She said they tried to find them before they left. Shannon made Mary swear to stick to that story if anyone, including the police, asked, and Mary agreed. That way, if Tanya and Rob had gone inside, the others had had nothing to do with it. Mary didn't know whether to be angry or worried. Where could they possibly be? Maybe they'd fallen asleep inside the mall and just hadn't come home yet. Maybe they were dead. Mary shook the chilling thought from her mind and cast her eyes downward when Mrs. White passed by her doorway. Mary's mom looked fresh and businesslike in her tailor navy suit. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked. Mary faked a cheerful voice. "Yeah, everything's fine," she lied, feeling guilty. She felt like she couldn't tell her mom that they'd broken into the mall last night. She just wouldn't understand. Hopefully, she just wouldn't find out. Mrs. White smiled. "Good. Your father and I have to go to the mall for a while to finalize the concrete plans for Monday." She looked apologetically at her daughter. "We'll try not to get home too late, okay?" Mary disguised her panic with a guilty smile. "Okay. I'll be at Josh Pinder's party," she said, wondering if her mom somehow knew about last night. What if security had taken down her license plate number? What if the police started searching the mall for Tanya and Rob? "Have fun," Mrs. White said. "Yeah," Mary said. "I'll try." Mary fixed herself a bowl of vegetable soup as a late afternoon lunch. She seated herself at the pine kitchen table and slurped up a spoonful of the reddish liquid. Thoughts of the other night's attack invaded her mind. She glanced at the back door again to make sure it was bolted. Through the tiny window, she could see clouds forming in the darkening sky. What if Jeff Wayland had been the one in the mall sky dome? She asked herself. He's the only one crazy enough to follow me. Jeff's bizarre warning about Michael Myers entered her mind. No way. It couldn't have been Michael Myers. But what if it was? Jeff's desperate warning echoed through her mind over and over again. When he told her about the cemetery yesterday, she hadn't believed him. Thought he was just trying to cover up. But what if it was true? Why were Tanya and Rob still missing? Mary suddenly had a chilling thought. What if Jeff had something to do with their disappearance? Mary forced herself to swallow the last spoonful of soup. She went up to her room to get dressed for Josh's Halloween party. She had to get over there and find out if anyone had seen or heard anything about Tanya and Rob. Mary's gypsy costume lay neatly across her bed. She peeled off her jeans and sweater and carefully put on the new pair of shimmering gold pantyhose. In front of the mirror, Mary dressed herself in her clingy red broom skirt and a tight black halter top. The thin fabric of the skirt clung to her shapely legs and brushed just above her ankles as she twirled around, watching her colorful reflection. The festive costume did nothing to brighten her dampened spirits. The last thing she felt like doing tonight was attending a party and pretending to be happy when Tanya and Rob were missing. Maybe they'll be there, she told herself. Yes, everything will be okay. Mary set her long hair in hot rollers. She swept some sparkling violet eyeshadow on her lids and carefully outlined her eyes with a smoky gray liner pencil. Outside, Mary heard a chorus of little voices tinkling with laughter. She peered out her window and spotted a group of grade school kids clustered on her front lawn. Mary smiled, remembering how little kids go trick-or-treating on Halloween. She wrapped a black scarf over the rollers on her head and went downstairs, where she picked up a bowl overflowing with miniature candy bars and opened the front door. The children screamed when she poked her head outside. One little boy dressed up as a cowboy screamed out, "It's the boogeyman's wife! Run for your lives!" He picked up an apple-sized rock and hurled it at the house. Mary watched in bewilderment as they took off running down the street. The rock landed nowhere near the house, but it did come dangerously close to her new car. It made her wonder what kind of stories their parents had been telling them. Mary slammed the door and with a scowl muttered, "Little brats?" She suddenly remembered the horrible tale of the Halloween massacres, how Michael Myers had butchered dozens of teenagers, how he'd once lived in her house, how he always came home on Halloween. Mary glanced at the clock and realized she was supposed to have been at the party 15 minutes ago. She quickly unrolled the curlers from her hair and tied her curly locks back with the black scarf. She removed a bottle of her favorite perfume from the mirrored tray atop her vanity dresser. She sprayed a little of the fine, sweet mist on her neck and wrist and set it back on the tray. The beaded necklaces that she draped around her neck were a nice addition to the costume, as were the gold coin earrings that she clipped onto her earlobes. Mary looked approvingly at her reflection. She was about to leave when out of the corner of her eye she caught a glimpse of something that hadn't been sitting on the dresser last night. Mary picked up the worn, folded-up piece of paper and held it to the light. "Strange," she mumbled, her curiosity aroused. It looked like some kind of note, but there was nothing inside. She determined by the weight. She carefully unfolded the paper. Mary held her breath as her gold bracelet jingled to the floor. The same bracelet that had hopelessly fallen under the house a few days earlier. Its shiny gold luster was cut down to a dull gleam from the dried blood that was caked on it. Someone had been down there. Oh my God! Mary's blood seemed to stop flowing. Her body felt frozen as she stared at the bracelet. The sight of the bloody piece of jewelry sent waves of shock through her body. Whose blood is that? She quickly picked up the bracelet and with trembling fingers threw it disgustingly on top of the dresser. I should call the police, she told herself. No, she decided, there's no time. What if he's here right now? Mary grabbed her purse and rushed out of the house. Chapter 11. Mary maneuvered her car through the dark forest roads on the way to Josh's neighborhood, Haddonfield Estates. She passed the giant mansions and horse pastures that this posh area was famed for before she finally made a ride onto the cul-de-sac where his impressive home was nestled. Josh's house was easy to spot by all the staggering teenagers milling around the gated private driveway. The massive estate was built entirely of gray stones and looked more like something out of a history book than a home. A battalion of ancient barren trees surrounded the home, which Mary estimated to be several hundred years old. Mary squeezed her car in between two cars on the street. She walked up the street driveway and waved hello to a few kids she recognized from school. A gawky teenage boy wearing a sweat-soaked t-shirt and a silly clown mask swung open the ornately carved door and chugged down the remainder of his beer from a plastic cup. Mary politely stepped around the intoxicated bozo and let herself into the grand parlor. A few couples sat on the antique couches making out in the dim candlelight. The smoky living room reeked of beer and sweat. Loud music blared from the stereo system, and there were hundreds of kids in the room. A giant keg spit out cups of beer, most of it spilling onto the expensive oriental rug. A large group of kids danced in the center of the living room, the majority of them holding beers in their hands. Mary whirled around, trying to locate her friends through the pulses of the flickering strobe light. It was going to be quite a task, she thought. Nearly everyone was in a costume. She stood still, trying to make sense of the wild scene. So much for Josh's intimate little party, she thought. Nearly everyone from school was here, including the nerds, geeks, and every other social class and clique. At the very least, she figured he'd be in a major trouble when his parents came home. She silently prayed that Tanya and Rob were here so she could stop worrying. Shannon sneaked up on Mary and grabbed her shoulders from behind. Mary gasped and then laughed when she saw Shannon's silly costume. Shannon was wearing a red satin jumpsuit from the 70s with a pair of chunky platform heels. She spun around in the skin-tight outfit. "I'm the dancing queen," she shouted gaily. Mary could smell beer on her breath and wondered how she could possibly keep her balance on those ridiculous shoes. Kimmy clunked over wearing a leather biker chick outfit, and a pair of heavy boots. She pointed to her arm where there was a fake tattoo of a skull and a snake under a banner that read Mother. Kimmy looked at Mary and said, "You look pretty stressed out. Is everything okay?" Mary shouted over the music, "Like, no, everything's really weird. Have you guys seen Tanya and Rob yet?" The goofy grin disappeared from Shannon's face. "No, we're really worried. Her parents filed a missing persons report." "Maybe they just eloped or something," Kimmy offered, in her usual chipper tone. Shannon rolled her eyes, which were painted in electric blue eyeshadow. "Yeah, right. They've only been dating for 2 days? I think marriage is a little out of the question." "Well, excuse me," Kimmy snapped, after saying, "I'm just trying to figure out what happened. Let's go to the kitchen. It's way loud out here." The girls agreed and made their way to Josh's giant kitchen. Mary pushed a few empty pizza boxes off the white tiled counter and sat down. Kimmy stared at her under the bright fluorescent lights. "Oh my God, Mary! What happened to your neck?" she said, gawking at the purple bruises that formed a handprint. Shannon stepped in to get a closer look. "Ooh, that is gross." Mary had forgotten that her friends didn't know about the attack, so she explained. Someone broke into my house the other night. The guy pushed me around before I was able to escape." "What?" Shannon said. "Some guy attacked you? Who was it? Did they catch him?" Mary hesitated for a moment as a couple of girls passed through the kitchen. She lowered her voice to a whisper. "Like, they think it was Jeff Wayland," she stated, feeling almost certain that he was the attacker. "Oh my God!" Kimmy blurted. "I know who that guy is. He's the ghoul who lives by the graveyard. But why would he attack you?" Mary shamefully admitted. "Like, I used to date him." She racked her brain for a logical explanation and shrugged. "I don't know. I don't know why he's doing all of this." Shannon was aghast. "You used to date that loser?" she asked. "Yes," Mary said. She felt like a fool. "He used to be really nice, or so I thought. But now he's harassing me, and I don't know how to stop him." Kimmy's mouth hung open. "You mean there's more, sister?" Mary nodded. "Yeah, it gets worse," she said. "He's been following me everywhere. Before I left my house tonight, I found my bracelet." The sickening memory flashed through her mind, and she squeezed her eyes shut. "My bracelet, the one I lost a few days ago, and it was covered with blood." As Mary went on, she became more and more certain that Jeff was behind all of the recent disturbances, and she wondered how much further he would go. "Gross. How macabre," Shannon said. "Do you think that—" Kimmy cut in. "That he was the one at the mall last night? You said he's been following you, right? Do you think that he might know where Tanya and Rob are?" Mary cracked open a warm soda and took a long gulp. I don't know. Maybe?" Shannon stomped her foot angrily and had to catch her balance on the counter. "Of course it was him. That sick bastard. I'm going to make him pay." She dug furiously through her little gold evening bag. "Come on, you guys. Let's go." Mary's voice trembled. "Go? Go where?" Shannon held up the shiny keys to her car and growled. "We're going to pay Loser Boy a little visit." Shannon's judgment was clearly impaired by the alcohol as she stumbled out of the kitchen. Mary chased after her. "No! I'm not going to let you drive over there. You are too drunk and it's too dangerous. He might hurt you," she warned. Kimmy grabbed Shannon's keys. "I'll drive. I've got a can of pepper spray in my purse. We'll go throw some rocks and break a few windows on that sorry shack he calls a house," Kimmy shouted. "Come on, Mary." She sounded very disturbing in her chipper tone. Mary's voice quivered with fear as she imagined herself marching up to the madman's front door. "No, I can't go there. I'm afraid. Please, you guys, don't leave," she pleaded. "Please, let the police handle it." "We'll be back soon. We're just going to go harass him a little," Shannon said, the smell of beer invading Mary's nostrils. "You stay here and be a good girl," Shannon slurred, and slapped her on the back, making her cough. Then Shannon and Kimmy ran down the driveway and disappeared into the dark night. Mary felt totally frustrated by the stupid actions of her friends. "Great," she mumbled sarcastically. Where was Josh anyway, she wondered. This is his damn party, and I'm supposed to be his date. Mary had walked around the entire lower level of the house and hadn't seen him anywhere. Some date this is, she thought. Mary noticed that the staircase was blocked off with a roll of unraveled toilet paper. He's got to be up there, she told herself. Just as she was about to break through the toilet paper barrier, Mary heard an uproar of laughter and yelling. She peered through the sliding glass door and saw a large group of people clustered in a circle by the edge of the pool. She decided to check it out before she ventured off into no man's land. Outside, steam billowed up from the heated water of the sparkling, kidney-shaped swimming pool. The laughter and shouting were growing louder. Mary heard a girl's voice screaming hysterically over the noise. Something was wrong. Mary ran across the lawn and poked her head through the circles of bodies. She gasped when she saw her cousin and her friend, Michelle. Even on Halloween, their wild black clothing and ghost-white faces stood out from the rest of the crowd. Their black painted mouths were hanging open in shock. The girls were cornered by the entire football team, who were all wearing their uniforms complete with helmets. Julifer dug the heels of her pointy black ankle boots into the dirt as she tried to back away, while Michelle spat out curses at the boys. A fat, hulking boy wearing the number 49 on his jersey bellowed, "Confess your sins, and thou shalt be purified. Confess, witches, or thou shalt be drowned." The stupid, drunken voices of the others howled with laughter as they slapped one another on the helmets. Michelle spit in the bully's face. "Let us go, you pig!" she screeched. The fat bully wiped the saliva off his nose and glared angrily at the girl. He looked at his buddies and laughed. "Did you hear what it called me?" He let out a hideous imitation of a pig squeal, which made the crowd double over with laughter. "Come on, let's do it!" he screamed. Several of the boys grabbed the two screaming girls and swung them by the hands and feet over the water of the pool. Julifer struggled furiously and whimpered, "Ow! You're hurting me! Let me go!" Mary had seen enough. She stepped forward and screamed at the top of her lungs. "Stop!" Her voice was louder and more authoritative than she'd expected it to be. The boys set the girls down for a moment and turned around to face her. "What did you say?" The leader of the group growled viciously. All of their drunken, bloodshot eyes stared at Mary. "Like, I said stop it," she yelled. "How dare you pick on two girls like that?" Number 49 pointed his chunky finger at Mary. "I think she's one of them. Get her!" he howled to the others. The disturbance gave Michelle and Julifer just enough time to writhe free from their drunken captors and sprint over the back fence of the property. In an instant, the drunken jocks forgot about the punk girls and were now grabbing at Mary. Panic and instinct made Mary's strong legs carry her across the lawn with lightning speed. She darted across the yard and ran back through the house as half of the drunken football team stumbled after her. She burst out the front door and tore down the steep driveway. Mary spotted Michelle and Julifer, who were sitting on the retainer wall in front of the house next door, talking to each other in hushed voices. Mary could hear a few obscene jeers being shouted down at them from the house. Luckily, no one followed them any farther. Tears made Julifer's black eye makeup stream down her face in streaks. We should have never come here. We don't belong, not even on Halloween," she sobbed. Mary collapsed on the sidewalk next to them. "Are you guys okay?" she panted. "What do you think?" Michelle snarled. Julifer fluffed up her ratted, bleached hair. "Thanks, Mary. You really saved our butts," she admitted. "But you didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did," Mary said, smiling and putting a comforting arm around Julifer's shoulder. "Like, we girls have got to stick together. Besides, what's family for anyway?" Michelle averted her eyes and kicked the tire of a parked car with her red Doc Martens. "Yeah, thanks, prom queen." Mary stared at Michelle until she was finally able to make direct eye contact. She noticed for the first time that beyond Michelle's tough exterior, she was actually quite frightened by the humiliating incident. "No problem," Mary said. Michelle's nose ring glimmed as it caught the light from the street lamp. "Hey, sorry what I said to you at school." She made the peace sign with her fingers. "You're not a sellout. You're okay, Mary." Mary returned the peace sign and looked up the driveway at Josh's house. "I've got to go back in there. Wish me luck." "You're going back?" Julifer said in shock. "Oh, no. They'll tear you apart in there. The jocks think you're one of us." A picture of Tanya and Rob came into Mary's mind. They were still missing. The reality of this fact far outweighed the fact that the mob of drunken jocks might start chasing her again, might even throw her into the pool if she wasn't careful. Right now, she didn't care, though. She had to locate Josh and find out about Tanya and Rob. "I'll be all right. I just need to talk to Josh for a minute," Mary suggested. "Like, if you guys want to ride home, I'll be back in a few minutes. I'm totally ready to leave this party." Michelle laughed. "I think we'll just hang around here for a while, but thanks." She pulled a switchblade and a piece of paper from her pocket. "We've got work to do." She unfolded the paper and explained. "Tire slashing. This is a list of the jocks' license plate numbers. I've been compiling it for weeks." "Cool," Julifer smiled. "Let's do it, girlfriend." Mary couldn't help but giggle at their somewhat violent course of revenge, but she supposed that the punishment fit the crime. "Okay, have fun, you two. I'll see you around." Mary took a deep breath and braced herself. She waved to the two girls and trudged back up Josh's steep driveway. Chapter 12. Kimmy's earlier display of bravery totally dissolved as she drove Shannon's car down the isolated dirt road by the cemetery. The gleaming moon illuminated hundreds of gray tombstones, jutting out of the hillside, casting eerie shadows across the cemetery lawn. "There's Jeff Whalen's house, if you can even call it a house," Kimmy pointed, her voice trembling. "Maybe this isn't such a good idea. I don't think we should provoke him." "Keep driving," Shannon slurred. "That way." Kimmy gulped as they got closer to the run-down little shack just outside the twisted iron gates of the graveyard. "No one's home. The lights are off. Let's just forget it and go back to the party," she suggested. Before Kimmy had even stopped the car, Shannon flung open her door and jumped out. She stumbled into the dirt and cursed. Kimmy got out and pulled her friend to her feet. "Come on, Shannon. Let's just forget about it," Kimmy pleaded. "This was a dumb idea. Let's go back." "We have a little business to take care of first," Shannon shouted and slurring, her voice echoing through the cemetery. Kimmy shrank back behind the car as Shannon fearlessly marched up to Jeff Whalen's door and began pounding on it with clenched fists. "Come on out, psycho boy," she yelled. "We know you're in there." "I can't believe we're standing here by the cemetery on Halloween," Kimmy thought. "This is insane." The purple bruises on Mary's neck entered Kimmy's mind and she shivered. What if Jeff was in there? What if he decided to attack them too? She let out a relieved breath when Shannon finally gave up and staggered back to the car. Shannon was really worked up and angry, and drunk, Kimmy thought. "I know he's in there. He's hiding," Shannon decided. She raised her voice and shook her fist at the house. "Hiding! Creep boy is a wimp, and he's hiding!" She picked up a large rock and hurled it at the window. The rock missed and hit the side of the house. "Chill out, Shannon," Kimmy hissed. "Let's go!" Just as Shannon was about to open her car door, she stopped dead in her tracks. She pointed her finger toward the middle of the cemetery. "Over there," she whispered. "There he is. Let's go sneak up on Creep Boy and see what he's doing." Kimmy glanced over her shoulder and squinted at the tiny light coming from the center of the graveyard. A hot wave of fear washed through her body, and her knees suddenly felt weak. "Oh no, Shannon. We're not going out there." Shannon felt fearless and had her clouded mind made up. "We'll sneak up on him," she declared, as if she'd just thought up some brilliant plan. Kimmy protested. "And what? Attack him? Are you totally psycho? Did you see what he did to Mary?" She stomped her foot on the ground. "We're leaving now," she demanded. Shannon ignored Kimmy's logic and stumbled through the open gates of the cemetery. She disappeared across the moss-covered tombstones toward the light. Kimmy threatened. "Shannon, Gary, you come back here! Shannon!" It was no use. Shannon kept walking, deeper and deeper into the cemetery. Kimmy pulled out her tiny can of pepper spray and cautiously chased after her stubborn friend to persuade her to leave the cemetery. Kimmy's heart thudded heavily inside her chest, her eyes fixed upon the faraway light. There was definitely something out there, and it wasn't good. An evil presence seemed to be looming within the walls of the cemetery. Kimmy's feet crunched along the weed-covered ground as she tried to catch up with Shannon. The fear welled up in her stomach. She suddenly remembered a scene in a horror movie where the rotting hands of corpses reached up out of the ground to grab the ankles of... It was just a movie. Just a movie, she told herself in an attempt to suffocate the panic and fear she was feeling. Kimmy held the pepper spray in front of herself defensively. Even though she was terrified, she couldn't let Shannon out of her sight. She was too irrational now, too wasted to think straight. Kimmy had almost caught up with her when a blood-chilling shriek filled the air. Fear pumped through her veins as she ran toward Shannon, toward the scream. Shannon stood frozen before the arc of light, her slim figure silhouetted against a giant tombstone. Kimmy ran up behind Shannon and cried out in horror when she saw what had made her friend scream. The eerie, flickering light was coming from a grinning jack-o'-lantern that sat burning atop a crumbling tombstone. Shannon looked helplessly back at Kimmy with her mouth agape and pointed with trembling fingers to the etchings on the moss-covered stone. It was Judith Meyer's grave, Michael Meyer's dead sister. Kimmy shrank back in horror when she realized whose grave this was. "Oh my God, this is too creepy! Let's go!" she cried. Even Shannon, in her drunken stupor, was completely freaked out by the bizarre scene. She backed away from the sickening shrine and slipped on the slick ground, tipping over another grave marker and landing on her rear end on the muddy ground. Kimmy held her hand out to Shannon and pulled her up. "Come on, we've got to get out of here," she whispered, frantically looking around for the madman who was responsible for this. What if he's here right now, watching us, Kimmy thought. The girls frantically made their way through a dizzying obstacle course of headstones and mud patches toward the cemetery gate. They had nearly reached the iron-gated exits and could see Shannon's car when a hulking shape suddenly jumped out in front of them. Kimmy screamed and Shannon stumbled backward, aghast at what their eyes told them was blocking their path. "It can't be! This is some kind of sick prank! Oh God, no!" A guttural growl came from the mouth of the thing as he moved closer with ferocious speed. He wore a mud-caked jumpsuit and a white plastic mask that was spattered with blood. A gleaming knife was clutched in his filthy hand, and his black eyes were as cold as death. "This can't be real! Michael Myers doesn't exist!" Before she knew it, Kimmy's finger had dispensed a stream of pepper spray directly into the shape's face. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. Shannon screamed as he bore down on them. Fear moved Kimmy's feet away from him, and she yanked Shannon by the hand, pulling her back into the cemetery to escape the nightmarish monster that was going to kill them. "Run! Run!" Kimmy yelled. "If we can just make it to the back wall," she thought. Kimmy ran through the darkness, screaming for help at the top of her lungs. She was gradually being overtaken by a dreamlike feeling. Nothing was real. Everything was upside down and spinning. She realized to her horror that Shannon's hand had slipped out of hers, somewhere out there, and that she was now running alone. Her legs became numb. Her heart threatened to explode. She could see the wall now, just a few more yards. Don't look back. Don't look. Shannon's scream echoed through the cemetery as she felt herself falling. She tripped and struck her head against a tombstone. The sharp crack of her skull against the stone seemed to numb her lower body. She tried to get up, tried to move her legs. "Move, damn it! Move!" she screamed, yet no sound came from her mouth. The footsteps crunched above her broken body, and she knew that this was the end. Her mouth could not be coaxed to open and scream again. Her eyelids fluttered as she realized the truth. It was Michael Myers who was looking down upon her. The dead eyes behind the mask stared down at her, and his arm raised. A stench of rotten flesh and blood came from his mouth as he growled. With crushing force, he viciously drove the knife through her chest several times. Her blood showered down like raindrops across her face. She could not feel the razor-sharp blade ripping through her chest. Only the suffocation as her lungs filled with blood. The horrifying image of Michael Myers burned through her mind. The darkness closed in around her, and she knew that she was dying. Everything went black. Kimmy again screamed out into the darkness. "Shannon!" As her own terrified voice reverberated off the wall, she instantly knew that she was alone with Michael Myers. "Somebody help me!" Just as her terrified mind had imagined, swift, heavy footsteps squished across the grounds, moving closer to the wall. Kimmy glanced back and saw the silhouette of the dark shape moving in on her. Horror filled her brain as she watched Michael Myers stumbling down the grade toward her, the gleaming blade of his knife glistening in the moonlight. "Climb! Climb!" Dry screams croaked from her throat as she clawed at the towering wall of bricks, trying to hoist her body over it. She couldn't stop screaming. Her fingernails dug into the cement blocks. With a sickening popping sound, a few of her fingernails snapped off and were ripped away from her fleshy nail beds. She fell and stumbled backwards. Ah! She felt her body roll in slow motion like a Grand Prix race car, spinning and sliding out of control. "I'm going to die!" A mist of acrid, rotten breath emitted from behind the white plastic mask. His cold, lifeless eyes had no soul, a fact that was almost more terrifying than the deadly situation. Her bleeding fingers throbbed and she screamed out in agony. Michael Myers raised the blood-soaked knife and slashed it across her bare arm, delivering another shot of severe pain. She stumbled to her feet and pleaded for mercy. Don't kill me, oh, please, don't kill me," she begged. The face behind the mask seemed to twist into a cruel grimace as Michael Myers gripped the handle of the razor-sharp instrument. "Please, no!" she screamed as she stepped backward against the wall. She was trapped. The pain pulsated through her sliced-up limb. Michael Myers lunged at her and the knife descended downward. Kimmy's body pitched forward as he plunged the sharp blade instrument into her stomach and twisted it with brutal force. Deep red blood and rat tails of intestines spilled out of the gaping wound as he extracted the knife. Her broken body crumbled to the ground and lay motionless. All was silent in the cemetery. Chapter 13. Mary reached the top of the driveway and quickly slipped by a pair of football players as they staggered into the hedges. A sickening retching sound came from somewhere in the yard. Mary's stomach turned as she ducked inside the entryway to the massive house. Inside, the action was definitely heating up. A drunken girl with very short brown hair wearing a cheap French maid costume was dancing on the coffee table and lifting up her skirt. An intoxicated crowd of teenage boys hooted and cheered as she slipped a red garter belt down her thigh and swayed her hips to the pulsing music that pumped out of the stereo. Boy, is she going to be sorry tomorrow, Mary thought, looking at the stupid poor girl. One of the football players grabbed at the girl, which seemed to frighten her a little. She looked around and instantly sobered up. A wave of panic and remorse seemed to wash over her face as she stared out at the leering sea of pimpled faces. Without thinking about the consequences, Mary pushed her way through the crowd of boys and pulled the girl down from her little living room stage. The music suddenly snapped off, and the hulking leader of the earlier mischief with her cousin grabbed Mary by the shoulders. "You don't give up, do you, you little goody-goody tramp?" he bellowed. "We're just gonna have a little fun." Mary wished she hadn't interfered and had just gone about her business. She stammered, I... The French maid burst into tears of shame and ran out of the room as the crowd of boys stared angrily at Mary for spoiling their good time for a second time. Another football player entered the room and cocked his head to the side as he stared hard at Mary. "Hey, I know you," he stated drunkenly. "You're the stupid chick who rescued the witches." He laughed, then grabbed Mary's knee and squeezed it hard. "Yeah, it is you." Mary's face became scarlet. Everyone in the room was staring at her, nodding their heads in agreement. No, it wasn't me," she began to say. The flabby lips of the hulking football player babbled to the crowd. "See, I told you she was a freak, just like those punk chicks. She's trash." His belly shook as he howled. "I can spot a freaky slut a fucking mile away." He grabbed at her chest and chuckled when she winced with disgust. Instinctively, Mary raised her palm and swung. Her blow landed on the side of his helmet, nearly breaking her hand. His laughing face became a mask of rage as he realized she just tried to hit him. But before he could respond, Mary elbowed him in his soft gut and took off running. Mary broke through the toilet-papered staircase like a runner finishing a marathon. Obscene jeers and heavy footsteps followed behind her. At the top of the staircase, Mary hesitated for a moment, trying to decide which direction to take down the long corridor. There were so many doors in this house. Where the hell was Josh? She turned to the right. Her low heels clicked down the polished hardwood floor. At the end of the hall, Mary noticed a light coming from a half-open door. She poked her head inside and found Josh lying across his bed on a plaid flannel comforter. A black Dracula cape was draped across his bare chest. He smiled at her and said, "I was just thinking about you." Mary slammed the door shut and snapped the lock. Tears welled up in her eyes as she slumped against the wall. She could hear sounds of footsteps and angry yelling down the hall from the boys who were chasing her still. She looked to Josh for help and realized that he was completely wasted. His body rolled off the bed and clumped to the floor. He looked up at her. "I want to suck your blood," he said, laughing ghoulishly. Mary yanked him into a sitting position. "Josh, you have to get up. They're trashing your house like bad." Josh looked around as if he didn't know where he was. "Who?" he asked dumbly. "Like the hundreds of people downstairs?" she informed him, still shaky from the incident with the mob of drunken jocks. Josh shook his spinning head. He took a deep breath and blinked his eyes lazily. "Oh, yeah," he laughed. "The maids will clean it up," he stated casually, swiping his tousled hair back. "You don't understand, Josh," she protested, trying to break through to him. "They're ruining the furniture and—" Josh looked dreamily at Mary and steadied his voice. "Come here. I want to tell you something," he said. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. Mary rolled her eyes and allowed him to pull her over to him. "What?" she said. He's so cute and harmless, she thought. Suddenly his grip tightened. "What are you doing, Josh?" she asked, surprised by the aggressive behavior of this guy, who'd practically been asleep just a moment ago. His sour breath made her head instinctively turn away. He whispered, "I want you. Right now." Mary realized that he was dead serious. "Josh, stop it," she protested. "You're drunk. You don't know what you want." With a surge of strength, Josh pulled Mary to the floor, his nails digging into her wrist. He gave her a rough, forceful kiss. "You've made me wait too long, you little slut tease!" he shouted. Mary struggled to get away from him, but he was too strong. He grabbed her necklaces with free hands and yanked her toward him. Hundreds of glass and plastic beads bounced and scattered across the hardwood floor. "Josh, stop it!" she screamed as the situation escalated. "No, I always get what I want!" he cried out like a spoiled child. Mary suddenly remembered Jeff Whalen's warning. Something about last New Year's Eve. Something to do with a girl. She spat out furiously. "Is this what you did on New Year's Eve?" Josh froze for a moment, his handsome features twisting into an ugly rage. "Who told you about that?" "Who?" he demanded. Mary lied. "Everyone, Josh. They all told me what you did," she cried, Trying to figure out what to do or say next, Josh exploded. That chick was a whore! She deserved it! Mary couldn't believe what she was hearing. Didn't want to believe it. She leapt to her feet. I'm leaving! Josh grabbed her wrist again and growled. You're not going anywhere! Mary panicked and tried to reason with him. Josh, you're really scaring me. Let me go. You don't want to do this, please, she cried, grabbing the car keys from her evening bag. Josh jumped up and backed her into the corner of the room. An insane glow danced in his eyes, and a purple vein throbbed in his neck. In an attempt to get away, Mary swiped at him with her car keys and nicked the side of his face. A stream of blood dripped down his cheek from the tiny stinging cut. He stopped for a moment and touched the blood with his fingers. Rage stormed in his eyes when he realized that she'd cut him. He lunged at her and grabbed the ring of the keys from her hands, then shouted something inaudible and threw the keys out the window, somewhere into the darkness of the backyard. You're not going anywhere! He screamed. Mary trembled as he backed her into the corner. As a last resort, she kicked him hard in the crotch, and he crumbled over in pain. She scrambled out of the room, raced down the hall, and stumbled down the staircase. Josh burst out of his bedroom and leaned over the railing. His face was nearly blue with anger. He screamed, Come back here, Mary! I said come back here, you slut! Everyone was staring. Mary ran outside and didn't stop. Josh chased after her in a blind rage. She raced down the driveway and tripped in the gravel. Her thin skirt tore, exposing her knees to the sharp little rocks. Dull, scraping pain shot through her legs. She winced and saw him barreling after her as she scrambled to her feet. Tears began to well up in her eyes. Before she could run away, Josh had caught up with her on the dark street. He collided into her and she fell backward into a hedge. He grabbed her hand and pulled her to her feet. I'm sorry, Mary, please, I'm so sorry, he panted, sounding like a totally different person. Mary backed away from him. Her wrist was hurting from his tight grip. She struggled to break free, her eyes wide with terror. Mary jerked her hand backward and screamed at him. Leave me alone! Let me go! Not far away, Michelle extracted the switchblade from a tire and victoriously savored the sound of air hissing out toward flatness. Sweet revenge, she thought. She looked up when she heard the scream. Julifer's painted eyes darted around the quiet street. What was that? She whispered. I thought I heard someone yelling. Michelle slipped the blade into the pocket of her leather jacket and peeked out over the trunk of the car she just vandalized. I don't know. It sounded like it came from over there, she said, pointing, then ducking behind the car. Let's get out of here before we get caught, she added nervously. Julifer was still searching the street. The yelling had stopped. Then something caught her eye. Look, she said, wrapping her black trench coat around her shoulders. Michelle saw it too. There was some kind of struggle going on in the bushes, a couple of doors down from Josh's house. It's probably just some jocks fooling around. Maybe Biff and Buff were going for it, she said sarcastically. But I heard a girl yelling, Julifer said. I'm going to check it out. She might be in trouble. So what? It's not our problem, Michelle said. Julifer grabbed Michelle by the hand and reminded her. So, remember what happened to us earlier? What if Mary had said, so what? It's not my problem. We'd have been drowned in the pool, or worse. Michelle rolled her eyes, knowing that Julifer was right. They cautiously crept across the street. Okay, this has been chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13 of Halloween, the Old Myers Place. And I got to tell you, this has been an intense upload tonight. And I'm not just talking about the Michael Myers kills in the cemetery, but those were pretty awesome. The setting was great, the mood was great. It had all the tropes of a good slasher horror film. You know, I felt vibes of like Night of the Living Dead, black and white version, and Halloween. Like, I just pictured that cemetery, the moon shining down on it, the jack-o'-lantern setting on Judith's grave. Let me know what you guys thought of that whole scene, the deaths, where he killed him, the scenery, everything, how you envisioned it, how it felt whenever you were hearing it and experiencing it with the music playing. And also, I want to talk about Josh for a second. This guy, we already kind of knew from Jeff's warning earlier in the book that he had problems. But I think now we realize this dude is a full-blown psychopath. At the very least, a sociopath. So, yeah. It's going to be interesting to see how he bites it. Because he better bite it. He better buy the farm. He better die before this book's over. That's all I got to say. And Mary better be okay. Although I don't think Michelle and Julifer are long for this world. They're good people. Mary saved them. But I feel like they're just going to be knife fodder for Michael Myers. Just my opinion. We'll see where it goes. Anyways, guys, tonight's upload was pretty great. Kill count. We got 2 deaths in the cemetery. Classic style with the butcher's knife by Michael Myers. And, oh yeah, by the way, let me know what you guys thought of the new opening. Not just the Kane Hodder intro, which is badass, but Slasher Pepper, a great YouTuber, a good friend of mine now. I've done some videos with him, some collabs. He helped me make part of my new intro that you guys saw tonight. The part where it says, "You want it darker, we kill the flame." I didn't know I had permission to murder and to maim. That was his input. He did a really good job on that, made it look like an old 80s VHS tape. So yeah, thank you, Roger, for all your help getting that thrown together for me. I really appreciate it. Alright, guys, I'll be back very soon with some more of Halloween the Old Myers Place. Until then, this has been your friendly neighborhood 80s slasher librarian saying, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Also, everybody, at the end of the video coming up shortly, be sure to click on Michael's sexy face if you haven't subscribed to the channel already. Click the bell to be notified of all future uploads. We've already got so many books done and so many more to come. Also, check out the playlist you're going to see on the end screen coming up. That is another one of these Halloween books. It's number 1 in the 3-book series. Also, there's another subscription icon that's going to appear. The guy's name is JV211, Jason Voorhees 211. He does a lot of Friday the 13th news, Friday the 13th video game news, podcasts, stuff like that. He does gameplay of Friday the 13th, the video game. He does giveaways. The guy is just the nicest guy. He's awesome. Go to his channel, click on his icon above, subscribe, and I will see you next time.